Socialism. Why people actually support it and why they never should. I can't believe in an era of endless information at our fingertips via the internet that people from Western cultures, specifically Americans, could actually advocate and support a socialist government. Can't they simply do some research and learn that socialism has destroyed every government that was ever attached to it? I mean, just look at Venezuela today. This socialist-run country's economy has completely failed because of its collectivist methods, and now one of the richest countries in all of Latin America has had their entire economy crippled and devastated. People are lining up to jump into trash dumpsters just to scurry like rats for leftover food simply because they don't want to die of starvation. If socialism was trying to make everyone impoverished equally, then it was a great success. Venezuela aside, remember Stalin, Mao, Mussolini, all communists that used the lure of socialism to pave the way for their totalitarian agendas. Hundreds of millions of innocent people killed through multiple genocides, all for the idea of a communist utopia. So if the outcome is so demonstrably the same throughout history, why would anybody in their right minds continue to support it? Could it be that people have been misinformed, perhaps? Before we search for an answer, let us start by defining socialism. Google defines socialism as a political and economic theory of social organization that advocates the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. The second one, policy or practice based on political and economic theory of socialism. And then the third one, in Marxist theory, a transitional social state between the overthrow of capitalism and the realization of communism. In reading these three common definitions of socialism, you quickly get an ominous chill shoot right through your spine. Let's pay extra close attention to the first and third definitions. In the first description, socialism means that its nation owns and operates the entire economy, and by a proxy, the entire government. What the community as a whole truly is in actuality is a totalitarian regime masquerading as a government, and the people, you, are the subjects. So all of the benefits of capitalism, such as free markets and competitive businesses that constantly innovate and improve their offerings to attract your money and support, all of that is lost, and it's been replaced with a collectivist government monopoly that uses a one-size-fits-all approach to service the entirety of the economy. All personal assets are confiscated and redistributed so that everyone has the same or equal means. By doing this, there is no longer any incentive for people to contribute anything more than the absolute bare minimum amount of effort, as the results of any extra efforts are just going to be taken away anyway. In the third description, Marxism considers socialism to be the temporary social order that bridges the gap between a working capitalist structure, which again offers robust options for choice and motivating incentives. This transitions into a communist, homogenized, repetitive, and tyrannical government that doesn't respect individual rights or privileges instead. I'm sure you can imagine how this type of system instantly breaks down when you apply this to an individual person's needs when those needs don't match those of the collective. This type of model is nothing short of slavery. So why do people support it? Let's look at why people support socialism from a philosophical perspective. The correlation we're about to make stems from how most Westerners are raised. Furthermore, looking at it through this lens may change the minds of more than a few supporters of socialism. Since the inception of America's prosperity way back when, this country was built upon a capitalist ideology that formed the foundations of its economy and thus its legal system. Capitalism itself is very much based off of democratic ideals, in that the market is dictated by the people's choice through vote. If people like an offering, they will buy it, vote for it, and support it with their hard-earned money, time, and interest. Alternatively, if people choose that such an offering is not worthy, they simply won't buy into it or support it. As a result, such an offering must be improved upon or discontinued. If a business never improves and continues to make products and services nobody wants, that business will fail. This is the will of the people, and they have the freedom of choice. This creates a free market where only the best is acceptable. Obviously, this is what drives innovation and progress, and is the main motivation behind modernization, which actually increases the quality of living for everyone, everywhere, regardless of where they fit into that economic system. But regardless of if people have been misled by Marxist ideologies that favor socialism or not, people still buy into the premise because of the generous benefits and handouts that socialist politicians promise. That's part of it, but the biggest, most important reason why people support socialism is because of how they were raised. How we were raised? How does that have anything to do with it? Sure, Americans may have grown up and lived in a capitalist society their entire lives, but technically, all kids were raised as socialists. You may not even realize it, but most citizens of the modern developed world are in fact raised socialist. See, when you're a child living in your parents' house, you are actually living in a socialist economy. Parents provide all the child's resources for them. They teach them, they support them financially, provide shelter, etc. All of this is free to the child. And for all of that, the parents have totalitarian rule over their children or citizens. Children are given the exact same food for dinner, shared limited resources with siblings. They don't vote. There's nothing they can do if they dislike or disagree with their parents' rules. Parents can also force children to do manual labor without any compensation. Some even physically and mentally abuse their children and can be as hypocritical as they want. They can tell their child when and where to shit, how high they can jump, and have a complete and utter control over their child's actions, thoughts, and emotions. And there's literally nothing the child can do about any of this should they protest. This is domestic communism. If we want to understand how bad socialism can get, just extrapolate this scenario onto our actual government and think about how this would affect the lives of the adults who live in this society. Freedom is the ultimate price, and that is exactly what is lost. Since many of us grew up in these micro-communist environments, we are already primed to fall in line with it as adults. The second a clever salesman starts selling us on utopian dreams that require socialism, many of them chomp at the bit. All of this support for socialism, which is in fact the first stage of communism, is bred into us from our youth. So subconsciously or subliminally, many people are duped into thinking socialism is the only true path to utopia, because it is the system that raised them. Utopia means the perfect place for everyone to live. Everything is equal, and the government provides everything. But a utopia is an impossible ideal, because no two people will ever agree on what perfection is. Regardless, people fight, cheat, and kill to achieve utopia anyway. Maybe you had good parents growing up, and you were inclined to assume that this type of authority might benefit our society, but such a model only works on a small, very limited scale. The more people, the less effective socialism actually becomes, because the same amount of resources are spread out evenly, regardless of how many people are involved. The more people, the less resources. It's that simple. Also, more people means more conflict that must be equalized. Why you should never support socialism. Socialism always leads to communism. So if you want to have a say, cast your vote, have free will, free speech, the freedom to choose products and services based on merit, and not because you were forced to against your will, but because you decided it was in your best interest to do so, or if you believe you have the right to freely decide how to take care of yourself or your family, then you simply must not support socialism in any way. Sure, socialism may work in a family household with a handful of people, but over an entire country or society, the whole premise quickly falls apart. The only model that scales with the growth of the people is capitalism. With capitalism, there's plenty of healthy competition, lots of choices for products and services, and a stable platform that creates mutual interest for all parties involved. Sure, there are flaws, but by and large, it is the only model that focuses on the individual's rights over that of the collective. When you stop considering the good of the individual in favor of the collective, then you can justify just about any horror as necessary for good of the collective. This is an extremely dangerous rationale to come to, and it must be vehemently opposed for a myriad of reasons. One such reason is because this model suggests that individuals, you, me, we, are expendable in service of the collective. If a new policy is drafted that says the only way to sustain the economy is to lower the population by 1 million people, then 1 million people will be sacrificed, just like that, because it saves the rest. Sorry, but I don't think many people would be lining up to give their lives for an ungrateful collective, people they don't even know. Would you? I don't think so. Standing out as an individual means you simply have no rights if you find yourself outside the collective. If you ever stick out, you will be considered a threat to the group, and you will be dealt with without hesitation. If you want proof, just look at how leftists of today sacrifice their own people the second their blind compliance gives way to objective reasoning. Another problem that occurs with all this equality that socialism promises is extreme entitlements and forced laziness. With entitlements, people just assume they have an equal share of everything, regardless of how deserving or necessary having an equal share is to every single person. This can become a very wasteful practice. With laziness, people who produce things literally have no reason to produce more than they can consume, because all production yields will just be redistributed anyway. So the extra effort to produce abundance is wasteful and expensive. Instead, producers would just end up doing enough and literally nothing more. Think about it from your own perspective. Would you be happy to work 70 plus hours a week to produce goods and services for people you don't know without any compensation? Instead of spending time with your family, enjoying your own life, you're working from sun up to sundown, just so you can endlessly produce without receiving any benefits. Sorry, but this just shouldn't sit well with any sane, logical person. Conclusion. Socialism is always a horrible system which only benefits the very few at the top, while everyone else is basically a slave. Capitalism, on the other hand, does not have these problems. With capitalism, your product is not stolen and redistributed. You are fairly compensated for all your efforts. All people have the ability for economic and social mobility. All people have freedoms, liberties, and choices. Innovation is rewarded, and people strive to better themselves so they can increase the positive opportunities that come into their own lives. Capitalism equals freedom. If you support freedom, free trade, free markets, technological innovations, unbiased truths, individual liberties, economic and social mobility, democracy, limited government regulations, and politicians that protect the rights of the individual, then you are a capitalist. And since you're a capitalist, you need to protect that. If people talk bad about capitalism, you need to set them straight. Thanks for listening, guys. I hope this made sense to you. Please hit me up with the comments. Make sure you subscribe, hit the bell, and we'll see you soon.